February 14th, 2017. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. I hope everyone's having an extra special romantic holiday this year. And speaking of romance, there's no real secret here. I have a fascination with the Yankee Candle company, and it's been a big year for Yankee Candle, that's for sure. They have already introduced 10 brand new fragrances, and it's not even been 2 months into the new year. I've had my chance to get my hands on each and every one of these candles, document, video, share my thoughts, opinions, my in-depth analyses. All of those videos, all of those reviews and analyses are going to be linked up in the description below. Make sure you check those out because there's some wildly fun and well-executed candles produced by Yankee Candle this year. And just as a reminder, those candles were Mediterranean Breeze, Cafe al Fresco, Honey Lavender Gelato, French Countryside, Guava Coconut Fusion, Coconut Beach, Black Sand Beach, Island Waterfall, Tahitian Nights, and Sicilian Lemon. Woo! A lot of candles. And if you've been paying very close attention, you would have realized that there's still one candle that I have yet to discuss. I've mentioned it a bunch of times, but I haven't shared with you my thoughts and impressions. Why? Well, it just simply hasn't been released yet. But that hasn't stopped me. I've made numerous calls. I've been scouring the internet. I've actually visited many outlets as well, looking to get my hands on this yet to be released fragrance, but I kept striking out. I couldn't find it. That is, until I finally found one and one only wax melt. So I introduced to you the 11th fragrance by Yankee Candle for 2017, entitled Tuscan Vineyard. Now, I've actually had this tart for several weeks now, and I've kept postponing this video because I was actually looking for it in the house warmer jar. Obviously, this is going to be a little bit easier for me to share my thoughts and analysis as compared to just simply sticking my nose up to a wax tart. It's really not the best way to get the full experience, but never fear, I'm fully prepared to share with you my in-depth analysis with a process that I've kind of created for myself called the aroma prism. This is also the topic of another past video. I'm also going to link that up below. But what I'm essentially going to do is break off a piece of this wax tart, lock it inside of this mason jar, and then submerge this into, not boiling, but 200-degree Fahrenheit water until all of that wax has fully melted. At that point, what will have happened is most of the fragrance oil locked inside that paraffin wax will have volatilized, filling up the negative space inside of this vessel, which will allow me to contain and smell the airborne fragrance inside of this jar. But I'll also be able to take a break from it, let my nose have a rest, and readjust. Go back to it, close it, readjust, go back to it, and step by step I'll be able to share with you my thoughts, my descriptions, my sensory evaluation of this brand new fragrance. We'll be right back to discuss Tuscan Vineyard. And before we jump into this candle, I want to raise up a few questions regarding Tuscany, or more specifically, Tuscan wine. The grape of Tuscany is unquestionably Sangiovese. Just like in Napa Valley, the king grape is Cabernet Sauvignon, in Tuscany, the king grape is historically Sangiovese. If you've ever had a Chianti before, or a Brunello di Montalcino, what you're drinking is wine made from predominantly the Sangiovese grape. And Sangiovese can exhibit flavors and aromatics of both red and dark fruit. It can be a little bit spicy. It can also have a savory side, like savory tomato, and an herbaceous side, with a moderate plus tannin and acidity. But this candle is not called Chianti. This candle is not called Sangiovese. It's not even called Tuscan wine. It's called Tuscan Vineyard. So it raises the question, is this going to take a wine approach aromatically? Or perhaps maybe even like classic Italian culinary aromatics? Or maybe even a stroll through a sunny, warm afternoon in Montalcino in one of those beautiful vineyards. Who knows? But the one way to truly find out is to dive right into it. Here we go. Let me tell you, if you haven't tried this method before, it works really, really well. Just a little piece of that tart will be more than efficient. Now, I did smell that tart before I smelled this. I didn't want to spend too much time with that tart because I wanted to save it for the camera. I am picking up a lot more notes smelling it using this process than I did just smelling the wax cold. I do want to confirm that. And there's a lot going on here. I think the best way for me to do this is to break this down in the most organized fashion as possible. And I think the best place to start is going to be the fruit. So one important thing to mention real quick is that 95% of all of the wine made in the world utilizes the grape species, the Vitis vinifera, the vinifera species, which is a completely different species than, let's say, like a Concord grape or Thompson seedless grapes that we find in the grocery store. That species is the Vitis lambrusca. Let me tell you, the aromatic profiles and the flavor profiles of these two different species, wildly different. The Vitis vinifera wine grapes are always going to be far more complex, both aromatically and flavor-wise. So if you're thinking that you're going to be smelling things like grape candy or grape jelly, things like Manischewitz made from Concord grapes, you are getting that a little bit, but I think they're trying a little extra hard to make this a little bit more complex in the sense of what we would find when we smell fine wine. I'm definitely getting a large citrus component, mainly lemon and, let's say, orange zest or dried orange, like the dried orange that we would put into potpourri. There's some hints towards red fruit, but I think predominantly we're talking about the darker black fruits. So think blackberry, think boysenberry, but more specifically cassis or black currant. And if you're not familiar with black currant, make sure you go to the grocery store or somewhere where you can purchase a product made from this fruit and become very familiar with the scent. It's going to come into play a lot when smelling candles or wine for that matter. But with all of that said, there's no question that this fragrance is embellished with a little bit of a candy side. You do get that grape candy or Concord grape jelly aroma here. And oddly, getting a little bit of Twizzlers action happening here. So yeah, a little bit of a confectionery side to this fruit as well. Or should I say red vines? Maybe red vines would be a little bit more appropriate. Coincidence? Yeah, I think it is. But still, it's a very appropriate coincidence, wouldn't you say? So moving on from fruit, let's talk about spice. It was a little bit difficult for me to identify the spice when I was just smelling the tart, but now that I have it in this jar, the notes are a little bit more defined. What's clearly coming through is cinnamon stick and star anise. Remember those two because that's gonna come into play a little bit later on in this discussion. But I'm also getting a little bit of a spicier side in the form of like ground ginger. And perhaps there's a little bit of clove in there as well. And a different kind of spice, but something that definitely has to be mentioned. We're getting some vanilla bean action. I'm also getting juniper berry. If we're familiar with traditional gin, most of those are going to be distilled with juniper berry. Next category, let's go florals here. Jasmine and geranium flowers. One that I'm tempted to say, and I will say, lavender. I'm not quite sure, but I do want to throw it in there. But that jasmine is coming through, which is giving this almost like a jasmine tea. If we go back to the beginning, I said citrus, lemon, and dried orange. When I talked about spices, I talked about cinnamon stick and star anise. And now I'm talking about florals. What all of this is doing is giving this candle a very perceived potpourri experience. And you're getting that dehydrated, dried out side of the florals, the steeped spices, and the dried citrus zest. Very potpourri forward here. Not surprisingly, this to me is smelling very autumnal. This is something that does remind me of autumn or the fall, which is appropriate because the harvest season for grapes is going to be September and October, at least when it comes to red grapes in the northern hemisphere. So that makes sense, but this is a spring or summer candle. So that is an interesting thing. So keep that in mind. Now let's talk about herbs, the herbaceous side of this candle. And I am getting a little bit of basil. I am getting a little bit of this fresh cut mint leaf. But what's really coming through the most is rosemary, a very savory rosemary. And again, that fits that potpourri profile. Let's move on to woodiness and earthiness. Let's categorize them together. A lot of the things that I'm going to mention are not actually wood, but they do add to a woody or earthy side. I want to mention sandalwood, and sandalwood's very appropriate. Why? What is wine aged in? Oak barrels. So that is enhancing the red wine experience that's happening. I want to throw in musk, patchouli, and amber. I can't say with 100% conviction that all three of those things are going to be in this candle, but I wouldn't be surprised either, because when you mix those three together, very reminiscent to what's going on here. They're not going to have a predominant effect on the overall aroma of this candle. This does smell potentially like a cologne or a perfume for that matter. And vetiver. Vetiver is one that I just mentioned. Very grassy, woody root note. And I want to say maple. Maple in some form. Not necessarily like maple syrup, but think of like maple leaves. Which brings up a good point, because what this is starting to culminate into is this very autumnal, decaying leaves, forest floor. So maybe this is a little bit more of that stroll through a Tuscan vineyard. Maybe you have a glass of Chianti walking through a vineyard, so you're experiencing both the vineyard and the red wine at the same time. Let me go back to that sandalwood thing real quick, because I just picked something up that's pretty interesting. At first I thought like, oh, I was smelling a little bit of incense. And I was thinking about it a little bit more. I'm like, wait. No, this smells a little bit more like firewood. And I'm thinking, well, what does that have to do with Tuscan wine? What am I talking about? What do they do to the inside of wine barrels? They set them ablaze. They toast the inside of wine barrels to many different degrees depending on the winemaker's preference, right? If you're making a really robust, smoky Syrah, you're really going to toast the inside of that barrel. Literally set the inside of the barrel on fire. That smokiness from the barrel will impart its flavor into the wine. And what I'm getting here is kind of that deep, dark toast. We're not getting things like mudstone, which is dried out clay and silt, or sandstone, or marlstone, which is rich in lime. We're not getting that minerality that I'm always looking for. But there are other earthy notes in the form of decaying leaves. In conclusion, let me try to paint this portrait here, at least the way I see it. This is not supposed to smell like a Tuscan wine. No, I don't think that's the approach they were taking. Nor is this supposed to smell like an Italian dinner on a veranda or just a stroll through a vineyard, but it's somehow a culmination of all of these things. There is a very significant red wine influence on this aroma, but there is a very outdoorsy, of the earth influence as well. Very complex candle. Usually I can just kind of spew out all the things I smell without any kind of organization, but this one had a lot going on. So hopefully I did a good job breaking up the categories systematically so that I could communicate what I'm smelling with you. You know what? This is a very romantic candle, very appropriate for Valentine's Day. And with that said, I have a question for you guys to end the video. By the time you see this video, Valentine's Day will be over. But what candle did you burn or wish that you had burned during Valentine's Day? What's your favorite Valentine's Day / romantic candle? It could be from any company. Please leave that in the comments below. And also, just to keep this segment that I call Guess the Disney Princess over my shoulder, can anybody name the Disney princess? Right there. Huge kudos to anyone who could tell me who we were just looking at. But that is going to do it for me today. As always, thank you for joining me as I talked about one of my favorite passions in the world, candles, more specifically aroma. And I just want to extend a sincere thank you for all of you folks who keep coming back to watch these videos. I truly do appreciate it. It makes me really happy when I see the positive feedback in the comments below. It just fuels me up to keep going. So one more time, happy Valentine's Day. I hope you had a great holiday, and I'm going to see you guys very soon. Thanks for watching.